All right, welcome back to our continuation of our Unit 8 notes. This is a this is for Section 5 for Unit 8. Unit 8 being, of course, aquatic and terrestrial pollution. In this video, we're going to be looking at eutrophication for the fifth section. This is, of course, a re-recording, so hopefully things go well compared to last time. All right, so just a reminder, we've been talking about eutrophication a lot this year. It's kind of been an ongoing theme, but just a reminder, essentially when you get excess nutrients in the water, specifically nitrogen and phosphorus, you get eutrophication. If you have this caused by anthropogenic sources, such as runoff from fertilizers, we call it cultural eutrophication. So if it's human caused, it's cultural. If it's not human caused, it's just the natural eutrophication. So nitrogen and phosphorus essentially are introduced into the water, which create algal blooms. This creates a high BOD, which is the biologic oxygen demand, which ends up leading to having dead zones. So then in these areas, we call them hypoxic or anoxic if they are low in oxygen. So you can see from the diagram here, you have an introduction of nitrogen and phosphorus. This increase of nutrients creates an algal bloom. When the algae die, they are decomposed, and that decomposition process actually uses up a lot of the available oxygen, so then the dissolved oxygen levels decrease very low. When we're talking about cultural eutrophication, usually we're looking at fertilizers. So fertilizers are spread on the land, they get then washed and absorbed into the soil, or they could be transported directly into water, but this is underground. So the fertilizer gets into the soil, it's then transported by an underground river and gets into the water source. The fertilizer then creates an overgrowth of aquatic plants and algae. So then the sunlight cannot reach the bottom of the lake, which causes the algae to die. And then the bacteria that decompose that algae will take up all that oxygen, creating an anoxic lake, which causes other organisms to die because they don't have an available source of oxygen. Just a reminder, in the different types of lakes, there are three main types when we're talking about nutrients. We have oligotrophic, mesotrophic, and eutrophic. Oligotrophic have low nutrients, stable algae, and a high amount of dissolved oxygen. Oligotrophics are very clear, but it doesn't always mean that they are the healthiest because they usually have low nutrients. So you typically see these three types of lakes and different species that thrive in each one. So when you have eutrophication in a lake, naturally, usually it happens over such a long period of time that the organisms that are selected to live there do well in those situations. So here's an example of looking at a healthy ecosystem versus a eutrophic ecosystem. In that eutrophic ecosystem, you see high levels of nitrogen and phosphorus are introduced, which create dead zones, whereas in a healthy ecosystem, the nitrogen and phosphorus is lower. They go through the food chain, they go through the natural processes of the biogeochemical processes, and it allows for species to survive and thrive. When we look at different sources of eutrophication, this graphic shows you a lot of the sources. So sewage, untreated and treated, can cause high nitrogen and phosphorus levels. Detergents create an increase in phosphorus. The combustion, which actually releases NOx, can help to lead to an increase in nitrogen. Fertilizers and manures have nitrogen and phosphorus in them. Just normal runoff introduces more nitrogen and phosphorus. So all of these are different sources, and most of these, well, actually all of these in this graphic, are going to be cultural eutrophication sources. So that is going to bring us to the end of this video on eutrophication. Our next video will be about thermal pollution.